Kia ora whānau. So this is Aro Matawai Tuatori, Assessment 3, the learning outcomes of the two landmarks that we've chosen here. So these are significant landmarks found in Hawke's Bay, and the first one I'm going to talk to is the Otatara Pā. And so if we could get that one. And here's this one here. Cool. Alright, so so earlier today we had a bit of a brief discussion, and this is what came out of our discussion earlier today, was that Otatara Pā is found in Hawke's Bay. It's situated near the EIT in Hastings. It's the largest pā site found in the bay, and it's the oldest. There is an upper pā and a lower pā, and the upper pā is called hikoi4life, and the lower part is called Otatara. Now this is a bit of a story that goes with this. So it was actually the most favoured place to situate your tribe because of the location of it and the height, and so it was quite a strategic choice to choose where Otatara Pā was being built. Now there's a couple of things to consider in here. First of all is that there was a chief by the name of Tiro Whā, who was the paramount chief of Pakipaki, and but the other chief next to him was Taraia, who led Kahungunu to Heretaunga, and as they were being attacked. Now when occupied and contested for the conquest of this maunga, they actually gained it through marriage and mana through the iwi as it expanded. So it was one of the most dominant, I suppose, Hawke's Bay pās, from Hawke's Bay down to Wairarapa. Now the mana of these two chiefs has been commemorated over the years. And so in that, it still retains its landmark features as it was since back then. Now in terms of, I suppose, preserving this landmark, was that when we look after these places, we maintain the mauri of the area. The stories that are being told about the pā site actually continue to give life to this pā, and I think as we look a little bit further, it's a favourite attraction for tourism. So it's another way of us being able to share our whakapapa and our stories about our people, and especially about the site. But not only that, when all this is done, it enhances the mana not only of the pā site but also the marae that is connected close to it. So that's our first landmark, and there is a waiata that goes with it, but I can't sing it. I do have it, and I'll send that along with this accompanying part of the video. Thank you, and our next one will be Te Matapik or Rongo Kako. Shot. Beauty. Thank you. So here's an interesting thing. Te Matapik, known as Rongo Kako. So this was about the in Hawke's Bay, the giant that I suppose they call it the sleeping giant. And there's a story that goes with this, is that, whānau living on the Heretaunga Plains were always under constant attack from tribes from the Waimarama area. And so as a result of this, huis were held in Pakipak to find a solution. And with all the, I suppose, the talking, an old lady or an old kuia recited this remark as part of the solution, and in fact it was the solution, and it goes like this: he haina te wahine ka horihia te pō, meaning that the ways of the woman can overcome the effects of darkness. So this kind of like began the story of Hene Rākau, who was the daughter of the Pakipak chief, and her job was to entice the leader, I suppose Te Mata, to fall in love with her and turn his thoughts of war into peace. But what actually happened, she actually fell in love with him. And when this happened, she asked if he could prove his undying love for her by performing some of these impossible tasks. And one of those tasks was that he was to chew parts of the mountain to carve a pathway through for the people to travel through. And unfortunately, he took such a great bite that he choked and he fell. And the place that he fell is the place that we now see as part of Te Mata Peak. So that was the second landmark that has pretty much good significance for us here in the Hawke's Bay. I've also recorded another song to this one, a waita. It's called Rongo Mā Wahine. So that's a very popular tune here in the Bay. And so I'll transfer that along with this presentation as well. Kia ora, thank you. Kia ora whānau. So this is assessment 2. Aroha matawai tuarua. And there are 3 things that we are going to discuss in this one, or share I should say, is the impact of colonisation on Te Taiao, the impact of legislation on Te Taiao, and the impact of legislation on the traditional rights and responsibilities of Kaitiaki. Would you like to read the introduction to that? Chantel, eh? Oh, Chantel. Chantel, don't tell. Okay.
The introduction of a new culture planting its feet and to another's by subtle manipulation and cunning strategies of false intentions and underlying fake agendas is really what underpins the impact of colonisation on Te Taiao, the environment.
Yeah.
And so begins the journey of the impact of colonisation on Māori, and its environment is far-reaching. It extends itself into arenas of politics, spirituality, economics, society, and psychology for Māori. It deals with losses, loss of land, loss of sovereignty by one group to another. When I speak of loss of land, it left Māori in a very traumatic state of mind. Losing their land meant loss of access to traditional food sources. This left many tribes to poverty, and as a result, poor nutrition and the traditional diet let disease take hold and spread. Bronchitis and tuberculosis, killing large numbers of Māori. With the loss of power, loss of identity, loss of statutes, loss of language and culture, came big changes in the environment. The spaces of the ngahere has been changed dramatically with European conservation plans and the introduction of intervention environmental plans to preserve after what they have done to it.
Take that and it's still going. Go, and I'd just like to do a presentation Okay, so let's see, cool. So I have a little bit of a diagram here, and I'm trying to remember what that is now. So colonisation on Maori, I've abbreviated it as COMS. So I suppose with the introduction of new culture coming in on the scene, a couple of things that really I felt that we needed to discuss that impacted on us was, one was the land. And so when the settlers arrived, so many of them arrived that there was such a big demand for land. And so there, I suppose in terms of when the European came, they started implementing their own laws, and legislation was introduced, and thereby, like if Māori weren't, I suppose, if they weren't observing some of those rights, then obviously their land was going to be confiscated from them, or either that, or they would go to jail. And if they didn't want to go to jail, then they would most probably elect to just give them a little bit of land. But over time, that happened quite a lot, and a large majority of their land was actually confiscated. So with all that, this not only, when their land was taken from them, this restricted access to their traditional food sources and plants for medicines. So this forced them to live in an overcrowded situation, which actually enhanced unhygienic conditions, which created poor diets and disease, and that increased the death rate of our people. So just having a look at it, the mortality rate of Māori dying was actually coming from children. As a result of that, we have that one of the four main diseases that was, I suppose, that we suffered a lot of was tuberculosis, measles, pneumonia and bronchitis. And this actually had a big impact on the numbers of the tribes. So with the confiscation of our lands, there were some other things that happened too. Back in 1886, 50% of the children of Māori died. So that was a significant loss in terms of the introduction of colonisation. But if we just go over to here for a moment, the impacts that it actually had on the open spaces like our bush and the forests was that our waterways were being affected. So the actual way that the rivers were running were being changed. The landscape was being changed by them European cutting down trees and creating vacant spots to build houses. And of course, one thing led to another, and before we knew it, Māori weren't only suffering in terms of loss, but they were also losing on the social aspects and spiritual aspects of colonisation. Because back then I can just remember my own mother, that she was told that she was not to speak te reo in the school. So in terms of that, that was a big part of our environment, was the language. So with that, that was the impact of, I suppose, colonisation on our environment. The next one that we talked about or discussed was legislation. And so had a bit of a discussion on this, and we've got legislation, which is, I can't remember now, but LOTS is an abbreviation for legislation. And so with the introduction of the European bringing in these new laws, there was a political restructure that European wanted us as Māori to kind of like abide by. And the closest, well, not the closest, but in the Māori worldview, we had already had this structure. We already had our own legislation, and it was found through tikanga and kawa. So if I have a look at it, I look as kawa as being our policies and tikanga being our procedures. tikanga being the way in which things should be done, but kawa was kind of like the policy. It highlighted this is what you should do, but the tikanga was actually the action. So if we have a look at I suppose the te tiriti o Waitangi, there were a whole lot of I suppose legislative or new rules, new ways that we had to operate in a way that our relationship would flourish. But unfortunately, the treaty was was a bit of a bomb. So our European brothers didn't actually live up to their part of the bargain. So I call that the Treaty of Waitangi was a classical legislation of introducing something to us, but there was more of an agendaed strategy to get things off us. So in that, the impacts of I suppose they changed the way that we actually governed ourselves, and as we became more educated, we actually started learning more about how we can operate better with our own iwi and our own hapus. I suppose as how does the legislation affect our rights and responsibilities and our traditional rights and responsibilities as kaitiaki, or as caregivers over our people and over our spaces, is that to this very day there are always big discussions about how things should be done. Unfortunately, there's not always a happy solution that comes with this, but the legislation acts actually are way different and way far off the mark from our historical and traditional tikanga and kawa. In terms of that, I think that as kaitiaki, it's our job to make sure that as we get more educated, that we do have a more of a say in the way that things should be run. So that's kind of what we come up with on this presentation. Hope you enjoyed that. Kia ora. Cool. So these were some of we jotted down a few things, but we've turned it into a bit of a story. So here we go. So the forest was regarded as a place of beauty, and it contained within it spiritual presences that held a lot of wisdom and knowledge. So it was also a place of bountiful medicines, food, and building materials. The forest is called by many names: ngā here, ngā here, ngā nehe, wao nui, and many other more names that they were named. So the creator of the forest is known as Tani, and he was responsible for the separation of his parents, the Ranginui, the Sky Father, and Papatūnuku, Earth Mother. Tani, or Tani Mahuta, known as God of the Forest, presides over all the plants and birds. Now the Ngāhere had a force, which is called the Mauri, of its own, which fed life into all the living things within it. And because of these many spiritual presences in unison with that life force, it caused the physical realm to flourish and provide life-sustaining nutritional foods to feed the marae in those spaces. Now all those things meant nothing without having a chant or a karakia to help preserve all those dimensions of which each living thing in the Ngāhere resided. So as you can see now, the Ngāhere was a very well-resourced space. Each living creature had a role, it had a place, and it had a measure to fulfill within life. So in order for the whānau within these marae, the Ngāhere's relationship was vital not just for sustenance, but the spiritual and whakapapa aspect linked the people and their relationships to what I see as a health and safety code to keep balance between marae, and the environment. Now the marae and the ngahere, or the forest, absolutely are connected so intrinsically that together are part of the whole family circle. Whenever there is a hui or a wānanga on the marae, there are of great importance, significance, such for example, tangihana, funerals. A walk into the ngahere to collect kai was a fundamental act of knowledge. The dependency on each other actually filled each other's measure of life. So further to that is that in times of old, certain plants in certain seasons were collected and even stored for medicinal purposes to heal any ailments that the people might have suffered. Birds and other animals served to provide nutrition along with the many waterways that back then abundantly provided food for many. Our health today is, as I see it, is a representation of just how we prove ourselves as kaitiaki over these large expansive spaces. If the ngahere is not being taken care of, then we not only risk our health, but a slow deterioration of destruction of our survival. I suppose what keeps the balance is, or are those stories of old, when recited and shared, help us to understand the importance of karakia, waiata, whakapapa, speaking te reo, observing traditional aspects that identify us or what it means to be Māori. So we look at our own meeting houses, and embedded within them are stories portrayed in the carvings and tukutuku panels. Just think of the materials to build these whare and the information, the approvals to be sanctioned, permission, and all the many other complexities that are used in transferring these materials for a structured foundational purpose upon where values and beliefs are formed to give us the marae. The ngahere has a higher meaning. I can't remember the whakatauki, but it kind of goes like this: I am not of my own strength, but of the many. So without all our atua to guide us, we would quickly find ourselves lost in motion and purpose. Kia ora. Kia ora whānau. So this is Aro mā tāwai tua whitu, assessment 7. And can you open up the book for the front, right? Oh, there it is. So this is the puka that we are doing the presentation on, mana Rangatira, ko wai, ako PTA 004. Oh, wow. Cool. So if you would like to turn back that page. Awesome. So this part of the presentation is we actually all got together and we wrote we put some thoughts up on the board and then created a bit of a story from it, from our own understanding. So it asks us to describe at least one way the marae or community connects to the ngahere, or which is the forest. And then 2 is the significance includes at least one reason as to why it is important to the marae and community to preserve these special places. Okay, so Scott, do you think you could read that out for us? Yeah. Oh, well, I could read it out. Okay. So just bear with me here. So